Welcome to Top of Mind, the show where we talk to real estate industry insiders and experts about the biggest trends impacting the market today. Enjoy the show.
Mike Simonson here. Thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the Top of Mind podcast. This is where I talk to the smartest leaders, thinkers, and doers in the real estate industry. Each week, Altos Research tracks every home for sale in the country. We analyze all the pricing and the supply and demand, and we make all that information available to you before you see it in the traditional data channels. For a couple of years now, we've been sharing the latest market data every week in our weekly YouTube video series. With our new Top of Mind podcast, we're looking to add context to the discussion about what's happening in the market from the leaders in the industry. So people desperately need to know what's happening in the housing market right now. It's been so hot, so competitive, and now suddenly the landscape is changing. When people ask me, Mike, can I get the data for my local market? The answer is yes. Visit altosresearch.com for book a free consultation on how you can get the local market data for your business to your clients today. And the crazy market is top of mind with my guest today. Not just the market, but how we as professionals communicate to those who need to know. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce my guest today, Tom Ferry. Tom is the founder, CEO of Ferry International, the real estate industry's leading coaching and training company. Tom's genius is in his ability to coach the best agents and businesses in the real estate industry to achieve greatness. Tom is a best-selling author and the #1 ranked real estate industry educator by Swanepoel Power 200. He's also a renowned speaker. His charisma and personality captivate audiences around the world. I've seen him. He's terrific. The reason we wanted to have Tom on the podcast is because he works with the biggest agents and brokers in the world. He helps them build their business and deliver outstanding results to their clients. So he's at the front lines of where the professionals meet the consumers. Since this podcast is all about delivering the context of the market, I can't wait to hear Tom's perspective. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Ferry. And I am thrilled to announce my guest, Tom Ferry. Tom, welcome to the Top of Mind podcast.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me, man. Like we were just talking off camera, it's been a long time, so it's really good to see you, and I can't wait to be at an event with you soon.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. We should I'll come by some of the Tom Ferry events. So
absolutely.
So let's dive right in. For our listeners and readers who don't know who Tom Ferry is and about Ferry International, why don't you give us a background, about the company and your work?
Yeah. So the joke is some people were raised on milk and cookies, or where I was from, Southern California, surf and skate. I was raised on residential real estate and sales training, motivation, business coaching from my father and other mentors. So basically for the last 27 years, I've been a business coach. I've been a strategist for CEOs of companies, fintech companies, real estate companies, top producing teams, brand new agents and everything under the sun. And today as an organization with about 207 coaches in now, I think 9 countries, we work with an enormous cohort of high producing CEOs, teamerages, teams, and agents that are kind of all committed to the same thing, regardless of right now. And you could speak more to this, Mike, and I actually want to ask you about it. One could argue this is one of the hardest real estate markets we've been in since 2009. And our commitment as a community is to continue to persevere and innovate and serve at the highest level. And that's really what I'm all about.
You do talk a lot on, I follow you, I love your work on Twitter and how it's universally motivating, not just about the real estate industry.
Right.
That's great. Let's jump right in about the market. Yes. As you said, it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard for buyers. Tell me about your take on it. What do you see, and how do you talk to agents about talking to consumers?
So I think the industry is trifurcated, and you will appreciate this. There's a third of the agents that aren't doing anything, and they're probably not going to do anything. They're licensed, but they're not really active. You got a third of the agents that are out there in the marketplace that are really struggling to find business. And then you have the top one third. If you're really paying attention to the data, you and I both know it's about 400,000 residential real estate agents that control about 73.5% of all the volume and transactions. And that group has a different set of struggles. They're struggling with time. They've got so much demand gen, so much inbound from good branding and good marketing. They've built teams, and they're trying to figure out how do they help at scale buyers in this challenging marketplace. So, we're spending a lot of time, as everybody else is, whether it is trying to refine a better buyer consultation to get out of this mindset, which is counter to a lot of the big tech firms and portals that we know about that are like, push a button, let me see a house. Like, there are no houses to see in that scenario. Today, it is more about really sitting down with a buyer, whether they bought 10 times or their first time, and really through case studies and examples explaining the situation that they're in today, right? It's not that it's a horrific market, but it's a market that requires speed and differentiation, better agent relationships, cleaner offers, less contingencies, all the things that Mike, you know, and I know. But sometimes we need to grab the agents by the shoulders and remind them that, if you're running a play that's causing you to lose, you might want to run a different play. And the same thing applies to consumers. Sometimes we need to grab the buyer by the shoulders after they've written 2 or 3 or 4 offers and said, but my dad told me I should get a deal, right? Well, okay, your dad bought a home in 1984, right? Here in 2020, the deal is anything you buy 30 days later, it's worth more money. Congratulations. So trying to help people navigate that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And then what do you think about, like, right now, all of a sudden, so that has been the story the last couple of years. Like,
sure,
you're buying, it's going up, you can overbid because, actually the mortgage payment isn't that much with the rates so low. But those dynamics are kind of changing right now.
No doubt.
And so now the consumers have a whole different set of fears. How does that story change when they're like, what if rates go up and I wait and it gets more expensive, but what if I get more opportunity? Or what do we, like, everybody's always afraid.
Right. I mean, it's so hard to unpack, because you and I both know you've got inflation, you've got Russia, Ukraine, you've got global uncertainty when it comes to finance. You've got the entire fintech world being disrupted throughout the UK. There's so many things at play right now. But I go back, listen, I have respected you for a long time and the data that you put out in the marketplace. One of the data points I'm paying attention to is the millennial cohort and the size and strength of that group compared to, say, the boomers, which, if you looked at it on a graph, the boomers are going this way, right? At 75, they're starting to pass on, like my dad's 76, so not right away. But that millennial group, like, I've got a couple of them right here inside my office. They all want to buy houses, right? And the demand of that group and the opportunity of that group for us over the next 7 to 10 years makes it hard for me to say anything other than housing is going to be good, right? Could interest rates, go to 4 or 5? No doubt, right? We saw it in the summer of 2018, right? That sort of, one could argue, Mike, almost much needed pause because the market that had so much velocity. So if that happens again, do you think the world's going to stop buying houses? Do you think people are going to stop betting on shelter? Do you think they're going to continue to live in apartments? Or with inflation, do you think they're going to buy real estate and have it go up in value and just arbitrage the interest rates? I'm betting on the latter. Will it be 6 million houses like last year, or will it be 5.5 million? Either way, that's a strong economy.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the millennials as a fundamental driver of the next few years, it almost can't go away. Like it can maybe almost get stronger as they reach peak earning and buying years. It will be interesting to see when the boomers finally do start to unload some of their properties, because they've been hoarding everything for a long time. Do you see any of that sign starting to happen?
I mean, not enough to make it so when I'm talking to my clients today and we're talking about strategies for attracting listings, as an example, thinking about the boomers, I say to them, you should look at any data source you have where you could pull up, give me every person in their house that has no mortgage, that's in their 80s, and the home is 2 stories. Like, that's just a most likely to sell, whether it's right now or sometime in the future, right? If you look at the migration patterns of howmoneywalks, right, .com, and it's so obvious. I mean, it's been obvious for 20 years, but now it's so obvious that sand states are ruling the day. So if I was sitting in the Northeast and I'm marketing to people, my message is going to be different, right? It's not like, have you dreamed about your Florida house, but it's like, are you ready for the next winter? Right. So there are some things we're seeing, but it's not enough. And I think that's the fundamental problem. Most people don't know what to do next. And there's almost too much information in the market for consumers and not enough people taking the time to sit down one-on-one and say, Mike, is this your forever home? What do you guys want to accomplish over the next 3, 5, 10 years with your house? Like that true consultant who cares about their client and isn't just trying to sink their teeth into a deal, but instead, hey, if I spend all day, every day talking to people in my database, talking to potential customers about what their expectations are, a percentage of them are going to do something. Does that make sense? I just don't think there's enough of that because you see it. There's just so many people like, I'm running fast. I got to get a deal, right? I got to get my offer in as quickly as possible. I got to hit enter in the MLS as fast as possible on this listing. It's going to sell in 14 seconds and I've got 65 offers. And we need a break. We need to slow down. We need to remember that we're in the human business, and buying and selling real estate, buying a house is it's human at its core. So I'm arguing for that.
That's great. I love that. And the concept of too much information, I see it every day.
Right.
And I'm putting out information every day, and we try to put out information that is valuable and insightful and unique. But I also know that there is, for example, right now, it's early April when we're having this conversation.
Yep.
The mortgage rates have spiked super high super high as fast as they've spiked ever.
Right.
At the same time, this week, a third of the new listings that hit the market sold in a couple of days, like immediately. A third of them are already gone. They essentially bypassed the active market. And so hasn't slowed down a blink in this term, but it sure feels scary. And there are no shortage of people who are in the camp that it is like things are about to change, or I'm going to wait until they do change.
But we've, you and I both know fundamentally the core of the concern for the vast majority of people is, are we going back into 2007, 8, 9, 10? Right? Like, so talking to consumers, talking to friends in my building, talking to clients, everyone says this, but, and they mask it all with, I read this headline and Bloomberg said this, and, this person said that. And I say, can we just go back to, you don't want to experience 7, 8, 9, 10 again? Cause that's all we're talking about. And then I walk them back through the numbers. What are we at? 39% of all homes in the US today have no mortgage. Is that better or worse than 2006? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, you're in housing. You should know that, right? 138 million houses. That's a lot of people that said, I'm just going to pay this off. And we're not talking about all the hedge funds because they don't own enough houses to represent 38% of all homes in the US. Then when you go through the data, the mortgage data, and I don't want to misquote it because, it changes, every quarter. But I want to say the last time I looked at this, Mike, and if you have the number, please, tell me, it was something like less than 7% of all homes in the US, if they put their home on the market today, they'd break even if they sold. And I would even question that, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably even less than that. Yeah, it gets better every day.
Yeah, there's so much equity, right, out there. We learn the lessons of 7, 8, 9, 10, right? So if things slow down a tad and, the 10-year continues to climb, which it is, but inflation also continues to climb, the stock market's a question mark for a lot of people. So when the stock market's in question, what's the single greatest asset? Let's buy more houses. Yeah. And I would argue, having bought my first house with an interest rate of 11, that whether it's 4 or 4.5 or 5, that's still cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. I talk about that. I bought my first house. I think it was at like 7.5, and I thought it was such a good deal. I locked it in for 30 years. I then bought my second house at 6.5, and I thought it was such a good deal. I locked it in for 30 years, and
Right. Is it true? And I heard this recently from a friend of mine who's in the mortgage space, and I didn't fact check it. Is it true that we're the only country around the world that does 30-year fixed? Have you heard that?
We're probably not the only country. Some actually do 40s, but a lot of them will do. It's much more common to be on a super variable, more commonly variable. Yeah. I know it's nuts. Tom, I love you, man, but 2.7%. Like, I'm not giving you that loan. you know what I mean? Like, that's such a good deal.
Right. It is, I think about a couple of the homes or investment properties, and like money has been so cheap, right? Which is also why we're dealing with some of the inflation issues, right? So I don't see us not going into a micro recession. I think we're absolutely going into a micro recession, but you and I both know if we pay attention to the last, 25 years, we've had 6 of those. 7, 8, 9, 10 was the one that everybody feels the most. And when they hear the word recession, they're going to go, fairies doom and gloom, and let's run that as a headline. Like Fairy says the world's falling apart. No, we're going to go into possibly 2 quarters where the GDP isn't growing as much, right? Where we have double digit, or not double digit, but 2 quarters back to back where we're not growing. And if that happens, I hope it's a call to arms for the vast majority of people that are sitting on the sidelines to get their ass back to work.
Yeah, and that one of the, as you point out, we're so tuned into the 2007, 8, 9 that we think about housing and a recession as correlated downturn.
Sure.
It could be that because of the demographics, and because of like the equity thing, the equity position, and that we all have really good loans, it could be that housing is the sector that helps us pull out of a coming recession. Wouldn't that be a surprise?
Well, hello, didn't housing do the same thing for COVID?
Yeah.
Right? During the pandemic, housing was the great white hope. I mean, it flourished during that time because people finally had options. Right? The pent up demand, the realization, am I in my forever house? Would I like a backyard? Do I need more room? Would I like a pool, be near a river, whatever it is? So I feel the same way. And a lot of it depends upon the millennials, right? And I know you know this, and if you could share some data points. I was with Ivy Zellman recently, and we were talking about the supply side, that right now we've got more sticks in the ground being built than we had back in 2004, 2005, 2006. Now, whether that number is 1.5 or 1.6 million, it doesn't matter because there's 8 million people that want to buy a house right now. The challenge is, where would those houses be? And are like, these 2, young rock stars that work with me, are they willing to go 45 minutes outside of town to go buy that really cool pad? Right? Maybe not so much in Dallas, as they both look at me and say absolutely no. But, in many of the major metros, that's where you have to go. Do you have some insight on that?
Well, yeah. So, and we also have, I'm interested in talking a little bit about Zellman, because she is actually, has published some research about how, like the conventional wisdom is that we've been underbuilding and we don't have enough homes. Right. But she's published some research that says we actually have built enough homes. And so I'm interested in getting your take, if you had a chance to talk to her about that take in particular.
I just published a podcast with her. When did we do that? A couple of weeks ago, but I want to say it was 45 days ago when we did the interview. So now I have a reason to text her. Ivy, if you're listening, I will be calling soon. So tell me, what did she say? So she said, the conventional wisdom
in our data space is that we stopped building in 2009, and we'd been building, say, 1.5 million homes per year, and then we started building 500,000.
Yeah.
And then we started getting a little more, and it's just this year when we're finally back over that long-term average. So if you add them together, it's maybe we underbuilt 5 million homes over that 10-year span.
Right.
And it makes sense to me. I don't know if it's 5 million or 2 million or 14 million, whatever, but it makes sense to me that we underbuilt. That's only one thing leading into our supply shortage right now. But but Ivy and the Zelman team did some work, and I think it was based on long-term demographic trends, boomer trends, as well as and she says, actually, that's probably not true. It's one of the contrarian takes on construction. It'd be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Right. I'll give you another contrarian point of view. I was just thinking about the other day. I was with one of my clients, Andy C. Big shout out to Andy. Andy was the #1 agent in Silicon Valley. He'll probably be named when the Real Trends list comes out. He'll be #1 or #2. He did as a small team, $985 million in sales last year. Right. So highly productive, does a third of all the business in Saratoga, Sunnyvale. So he's on stage with me in January. And I say, Andy, are we in a seller's market or a buyer's market? What do you think his answer was?
Well, if it's contrarian, he said it's a buyer's market.
He said, we're in a buyer's market. And you should have seen 2,000 of the most productive agents on the planet go, what? And he said, let me explain. If you sold your house in Sunnyvale 2 years ago for $2 million, by the time we got to today, it's worth $3 million. You made a mistake. But the buyer, on the other hand, that bought it for $2 million, picked up $1 million in equity. So wouldn't that put us in a buyer's market?
It's a great opportunity for buyers.
Right.
That's
It
really
still makes, I watch agents squirm, Mike, when I say it. Because we've been so conditioned to say seller's market, seller's market, seller's market. And yet the president of my company bought a house, 20 minutes here to the west in Dallas. And in the 45-day escrow period, from the time he opened the escrow to the time he closed, he picked up a couple $100,000 in equity. That sounds like a buyer's market.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
And do you see, I'm sure you look at the same data I'm looking at. So please tell me, the Home Price Appreciation Index survey basically says 2022 to 2027, it's a nice, the ultimate MBA, high end right on home prices all the way through 27. So what kind of market are we really in right now? I know Russia, I know uncertainty, I know, the midterm elections, I know, but damn, I'm still betting on housing.
Yeah, that's really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the future. We got a few more minutes.
Yeah.
And so some of the trends that we've seen are some of the migration trends and some of the remote work trends. You moved from Southern California to Texas during the pandemic.
But I bought in 2019.
Okay.
I was moving long before. It just took me a year to, get it done and then finally make the move.
Okay. So tell me about what you think about the remote work trends and like those migration trends. Do you see them as permanent or like, how do they impact, the agents that you and I work with every day? Sure. And then the consumers that they work with?
So, the good news is like, I'm going to make this statement. I am not an expert on this, but we've all been watching this trend. This trend's been going on for a while now. So it just got put on steroids during the pandemic. I remember sitting, Mike, in my office with my executive team and saying we had a little advance notice that Orange County, California, where we were, was about to shut down. So I literally got the team together and said, go buy 175 laptops, go get everything that we need. We're going remote. And they're like, what do you think? Like we keep hearing these rumblings of 2 weeks. Now, I admittedly did not say to my team, if you Google how long it takes for a pandemic to end, it's not 2 weeks. It's 2 years. So I was like, this is going to be the new norm for 2 years. Let's create some new products. Let's create some new solutions. This is going to be the environment. Thank God we've been on Zoom since 2017. Like, here we go. Fast forward to today, as we're onboarding, new employees, across the country, the number one question they ask is, do I have to be in the office every day? Like, that's the number one question, right? It's not like, what's the comp like? What's the package like? It's just like, you don't want me to go to the office every day, do you? Which is fascinating. But counter that to a very small sample size of teammates that we've lost in the last 5 or 6 months. The number one complaint they have is lack of culture, lack of community, and lack of communication. So you tell me, where does it all play out?
Yeah.
Right?
I actually have a hypothesis that a cool office working environment is going to be a recruiting advantage for companies. Yes. It's like, you want to work for a company where they hate each other so much, they never want to be in the office. Right. You want to be in the office where it's cool and everything's happening.
Right. My argument similar is like, we are a whiteboard get together as a group because we're better together than we are individually. we just work better together. Like there's so much power. Like, hey, Tyrese, let's go for a quick walk real fast. And let's talk about the next show we're doing. It like I got pretty fed up, as most of the world did, with like, can I send Mike a Slack? Can I get into a Zoom calendar with him? It's a 30-minute meeting. By the time we get the meeting, there's no more urgency. The problem's already been solved. Why am I now talking to him? I should cancel this meeting. Like that became the norm, right? So I also think about, so my older son is graduating from college, and his buddies that entered the workforce in 2021, like, hey, congratulations. You just got a job at Houlihan Lokey. You're making $100,000. And by the way, you're sitting on a Zoom camera all day long. What do you miss? Water cooler conversation. You miss hearing, Adam or Martha, who are the best debt restructured deal people on the planet. You don't get any of that stuff unless you're in the office. So I think it's going to be, my guess is 3 days a week is going to become the new norm across the country.
Yeah.
That's my hallucination.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's probably something like that. And then what does that mean for our industry?
Right. I think for housing, it's going to be terrific. The interesting thing, I'm sure you read the article USA Today, so this would have been a couple of weeks ago, The Great Regret, right? Which, I took that I left Microsoft for a higher paying job, making more money and fully remote. And now all of a sudden, I don't like the company I'm with. I moved out of the state, and they're now saying you need to move back. So are we suddenly going to get a bunch of new listings because everyone that bought in Boise, Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Colorado, that now needs to go back to New York or San Francisco? It's going to be interesting. I don't have enough data points to argue how it's going to play out, but I bet you do.
Yeah, well, I certainly have some opinions. I feel like it is a long-term trend where there's a hybrid and there's a fully remote. Most companies can't be fully remote.
No.
So it's going to be a smaller number that are actually fully remote. And then most of them will be hybrid in some way. And that'll be terrific. And so what that means is that your commute goes from, an hour commute is horrible. Like it's just destroying. But now if you're in 3 days a week, if you're in Tuesday through Thursday, right, you could do 2.5 hours, zip in Monday night, and back out Friday morning. And then, and all of a sudden your radius around the city center grows dramamantically. And so I think that has a significant impact on, like where people are interested in buying in the future. And in those, the real ex-urban ones were the ones that tanked the hardest, fastest in 2008. People that had bought further out to, as they say in Atlanta, drive till you can afford the payment. Those people are the ones that took the hardest hit, and that maybe that shifts from now on.
Yeah, I hope. Maybe it's just as a husband, as a dad, and as a friend, that we, as we normalize, that we don't forget self-care and taking care of our loved ones. And you know what I mean? Like there was some advantages of like being home every night for dinner. There was some tremendous advantages in that. And yet it's funny now, my wife's like, you're going to the office, right?
Yeah, for
Get
sure.
out of here.
I have my office here, but I'm the one. It's really for me, I like to sit in it. That's great, Tom. Look, it's we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much for taking the time with us. I really appreciate your insights and your take on the market. So, thank you so much, and we will talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Top of Mind. See you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.